1. Question. Have you ever been a slave? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. How long have you been in the Army? Answer. About 2 months. Report number 65, United States Congress, Joint Committee on the Conduct of War, April 20th, 1864. April 12th, 1864. At one time, he'd simply been Obie, the slave of John Jennings. When he joined the Army, he was told he had to have a family name, so he used his former master's last name. His superior officers addressed him as Private Jennings, but he wouldn't allow the fellow soldiers to call him that. Just Obie. He dreaded the sound of his name at roll call. It was as ill-fitting as his clumsy boots. "Private Jennings?" the sergeant yelled. "Here, sir," he yelled back, standing at attention and holding his rifle against his thigh. He kept his head erect while his large, deep-set eyes stared directly ahead, as the Yankee drill masters had taught him. His tall frame was as lean and straight as a young pine. The sergeant continued talking after he took the roll call. Like most men of the 6th U.S. Heavy Artillery of Colored Troops, Sergeant Johnson was an ex-slave. "You men be alert. General Forrest and his Rebs burn down Union City and kill everything movin'," he said, rocking his stocky body back and forth in time to his words. "Union City ain't far from here." The sergeant's eyes, as round as the gold-colored buttons on his blue jacket, scanned the black and brown faces of his men. Some of them were as old as 45, but most were younger, many as young as 17 or 18. All of the soldiers wore soft forage caps, which a few of the younger men, including Obie, had turned a little to the side of their heads. Obie was 19 or 20. He didn't know his exact age, but he remembered that he was about 10 years old when he became the property of the Jennings family. Even now, he'd still get a slight throbbing in his temple when he recalled his mother's screams as he was taken from her. "Severe punishment to any man sleepin' or even lookin' in the wrong direction when you on duty. This is war, not a rabbit hunt. You boys smell something funny, start shootin'." "Better hope it ain't him we smell," the soldier behind Obie mumbled. His name was Joseph Cheney, and he had joined the Army at the same time Obie had. Obie's smooth black face creased into a slight smile at the man's joke. The soldiers of Company B had nicknamed Sergeant Johnson the driver, saying that he was like those slaves on the plantation whose job it was to make sure the other slaves did their work. "Save the Union," Johnson said as he finished, holding up his fist. Some of the men moaned. Some laughed at his customary dismissal. Obie ran out of the fort with the other troops who had guard duty. Private Thomas West caught up to him, and they walked down the slope of the steep hillside to their guard post. This was the river side of the hill. The Mississippi River was hidden below them by the pre-dawn darkness and by the trees, bushes, and fallen timber along the side of the hill. "The driver is trying to scare us into being soldiers," Thomas said. "The only thing we've been fighting since we've been here is river rats." Obie adjusted his rifle so that it fit comfortably on his arm. Some of them rats may be having gray coats yet," he said dryly. As they continued walking down the bluff, they crossed a level portion of ground situated below the fort. Here were the shacks and log huts where the white soldiers of the 13th Tennessee Battalion were quartered. The black troops were quartered up the hill inside the fort in tents. The weary voices of men coming off night guard duty reached them as they continued their walk down the hill. The croaks and clicks of frogs and insects blended with the voices of the soldiers. When they reached the bottom of the hill, they turned left and walked toward their post. Their job was to watch several buildings near the riverbank where supplies of food, arms, ammunition, clothing, and medicines were stored. A blacksmith shop and a general store stood a few yards behind the building. Log cabins and broken-down shacks were sprawled near the stores. The soldiers called this cluster of homes and shops the town. Instead of going directly to their posts, they continued to the river's edge. Side by side, leaning against a tree, they faced the river in front of them. "I don't think the rebels are coming here," Thomas said. "The driver is just making himself feel important, Obie. That's why he keeps telling us the enemy is just around the bend." Obie still hadn't gotten used to seeing Thomas's rich brown face and hearing the nasal Yankee accent coming out of his full African mouth. Thomas, with his large head and wide, dark eyes, was born in the North, and was the first black that Obie had met who had not been a slave at some point in his life. About the same age as Obie, he had become a brother and a friend in spite of his Yankee accent. "Why do you think they're not going to try to take this fort back?" Obie asked. Thomas turned away from the river and gazed in the direction of the fort. "If they charge that hill, we can swat 'em down like flies," he said, moving his hands swiftly back and forth. Thomas was shorter than Obie, and he had quick, nervous movements. "Them was some awful stories we hear about what happened in that Union City," Obie said, "and Major Booth been looking terribly worried lately." "Stories grow with the telling." Thomas faced the river again. "He's just listening to some old tales we hear about how cruel General Forrest is." "Thomas don't know these Rebs. They comin' back for their fort," Obie said to himself. Two young black boys came forward toward them from the direction of the log cabins. The boys lived with their parents and another brother and sister in the last cabin closest to the woods. They stopped in front of Obie and Thomas and grinned as they saluted. "Right face," they shouted together. Obie and Thomas returned the salute. "Good morning, little generals," Thomas laughed. The children ran up the hill to the officers' quarters where they worked as servants. The whole family had run away from a Mississippi plantation when the war started, and the father was one of the cooks at the fort. "This war, the best thing happened to me. First time in my life I earn a wage," he told Obie. Obie picked up his rifle. "Now we can go," he said. "Yes," said Thomas, nodding. "Can't leave until we salute the generals." He chuckled. For the past month, greeting the boys had become a part of Obie and Thomas's morning ritual. They turned away from the river and walked back toward their post, but instead of stopping at the buildings, Obie kept walking toward the woods that lay behind the cabins and shacks. "Where are you going?" Thomas asked, walking quickly to catch up to Obie's long strides. They passed the general store and the log cabin from which the young boys had just come. "Want to check on something," Obie said. Aside from the two children, no one else had stirred yet. Only Obie and Thomas walked along the dusty, streetless town. Obie stopped walking as they entered the woods. "You can't see your hand before your face," Thomas complained. "We don't have to patrol these woods. Our pickets are already out there. What you looking for anyway?" "A sign. Can't see nothing, though. Don't know what hiding here." Thomas shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "You don't believe in magic, do you?" "You can figure words and letters, Thomas, but you don't read other signs." Thomas had been teaching Obie how to read, and Obie marveled at how Thomas could understand what a squiggly line meant. It seemed strange to him that his friend could read, but couldn't figure out obvious things. "I want to see if someone been in here. Maybe they digging or clearing path, changing the woods," Obie said. "I reading the woods." "Changing the woods? Woods are always changing, and everything looks the same all at once." "That's why you got lost in here," Obie said. He turned around as they strolled back to their post. "I wasn't lost that time. Just a little confused is all," Thomas smiled good-naturally. Obie rarely smiled, but when he did it was a surprise to see how straight and white his teeth were, and how handsome his long face actually was. He grinned now. "You lucky I find you before the driver. I know woods. Been in woods all my life." "I've been in New York all of mine, and I wish I was there now." "Well, Obie, did you smell something funny like the driver said?" "No," Obie laughed. "I go back when it lighter." They passed the cabins again, and Obie pointed toward the fort and the ravine above it. "That's what needs checking, that ravine." Thomas sighed. "The pickets are out there. We'll hear firing soon enough if any rebels show." He stopped walking and shook his large head. "They're not coming back, Obie. They have better things to do." Obie realized that Thomas was trying to convince himself. He knew as well as Obie that the fort was important because of the river. When they reached their post, the two young men sat beside each other on the steps of one of the buildings and waited for the town to wake. As the calls of the birds became louder, Obie saw the elder sister of the two generals come out of her cabin, holding her baby brother's hand. She carried a pail and was heading toward the well behind her house. Thomas saw her too and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. His wide eyes seemed to get wider. "That's a pretty girl, Obie. I'm going to sit here for 10 minutes and think about her." Obie wanted to reflect also. Each time he saw the girl in her long homespun dress with her little brother, he thought about Easter and Jason. He thought about the journey that had taken him from slavery and the Jennings farm in South Carolina. So much had happened to bring him here to Fort Pillow, Tennessee, on the Mississippi River.